All right, everybody. You can hear me and you're out there. Good afternoon. This is Don Rasmussen with CAD Technology Center. In today's webinar, we're going to go over piping, soup to nuts. We're going to try and touch on as many things as possible with Revit piping. We've only got about a half hour though, so we may not get to everything, but there can always be a future webinar for us if we don't. So without further delay, then let's go ahead and get started. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in. And as far as the stopping the webinar to answer questions goes, depending upon what those questions are, I may stop the webinar to answer those questions if they're relevant to the topic at the time. If not, we'll try to save answering the vast majority of those questions for the end of the webinar. All right, so we'll fire up Revit here. And the first thing that we need to really talk about when we talk about piping is we need to talk about mechanical settings. Now, mechanical settings can be found in lots of different places inside of Revit. The first place would be under your Systems tab. Whenever you see these 45-degree arrows that point down to the corner, that usually means that there's a setting inside for that specific group and or command. I'll go and cancel out of that. As you can see here, when I click on that arrow, my mechanical settings opens up and I'm able to make adjustments. You can also find that here under the Manage tab. Here's your MEP Settings, mechanical settings, they're right here. We can also find them under Pipe Types. If we right-click Pipe Types, say Type Properties, Routing Preferences, Edit, Segments and Sizes. Here we are inside of our mechanical settings again. So you guys can get an understanding that of just like everything in Revit, there's more than one way to accomplish the same task. So I'll come into my Manage tab here. In the first place I'm going to go as MEP Settings. When I'm setting up pipe types or pipe systems or anything having to do with pipe, this is usually my first stop. And I come in here because there's lots of different options that I'm able to do. Angles restrictions, this is an option we've seen a lot of clients here at CTC have success with, simply because we can restrict our angle layouts. So if we only want to purchase, say, 90-degree and 45-degree elbows, we can restrict our layout capabilities to just 90 and 45-degree elbows, thus controlling our purchasing. Then we have our conversion settings. Our conversion settings are set by system class. Now this is pretty important. I can create a lot of different systems in Revit, but I can't create any different system classifications. They are what they are. What we can do here is go through each system class if we want, set a pipe type to it, and then set an offset value. So if I wanted my sanitary sewer, for example, to start out below the floor, I can add a pipe type to this. So my domestic waste and vent, and I can put a value of, say, -2 feet. Then moving on to segments and sizes. Here in segments and sizes is where you're going to spend a lot of your time. Segments and sizes are going to be busted out by material types. So here's copper K. If I hit this drop down, so you have lots of different materials provided to me out of the box. We'll see here that we'll be exploring later this polyvinyl chloride rigid schedule 80. We have this material type in here for a pipe type that we can create in out-of-the-box Revit. However, we don't have any schedule 80 fittings in out-of-the-box Revit, which provides another issue that we have to overcome in order to create our schedule 80 pipe families. Then we'll move on to fluids. We can do different fluid creation inside of Revit. We can do, obviously, as you see, polypropylene glycol, ethanol glycol, or ethylene glycol, excuse me, water. And for each one of these, we can create and pick different thermal properties that go along with that. All this information is important to the calculation side of Revit. So if you want Revit to be able to run calcs accurately, a lot of this has to be set up. Now, one thing I want you to note in the segments and sizes, fluids, you'll see that you just have a new temperature and delete temperature. You cannot come in here and edit this information. You can simply delete the information here and add new additional information here. So whenever you're doing something like a segments and sizes and a fluids, A lot of times you're kind of starting at zero and then building in your company standard or what you want to have in there. Then we can get into slopes. Now these slope values just populate the drop-down list, your ability to pick specific slopes. They do not restrict your ability to slope pipe in any way, shape, or form. They're just here to essentially populate that drop-down menu or this slope selection. So these are the big areas that we would have to come in and modify for pipe settings. I'm just going to go back into segments and sizes here, and I'm going to look at one I created specifically for this webinar. I'll go to Schedule 80 PVC. And I've added specific, oh, I'm on standard, excuse me guys. Let's go here, type properties, segments and sizes. All right, we didn't save any of that, so I thought I saved that, guys. My apologies. We'll go here through here and just modify some things then. The first thing we want to do when we're in our mechanical settings is we want to pick which material type that we want. If we don't have that specific material type in this list already, you can always browse out to the material list. So new piping segments right here. We can delete ones that are in there as well. But we'll create a new piping segment. Now when you create new pipe segments, they're going to be done by material, schedule type, or material and schedule type. Pick whichever one is more accurate to what you're trying to do. For this particular one, where I'm going to pick material and schedule type, and then I'm going to browse out and find my material. Now when I'm out here looking for my material, you'll notice that I have all different types of material in here, just materials that are loaded inside of my Revit file. When I'm here inside the Revit file, I can make a pipe type that's made of earth if I really want. I can create a pipe type that's made of fabric. Revit is not going to care what material type I pick in this situation. We can really literally pick anything. So just for the case of this webinar, I'm going to go ahead and pick aluminum. Now when I grab aluminum, you'll notice I have a bunch of tabs up here that house different information. Identity, graphics, and appearance are all basically for rendering. This kind of stuff usually isn't important to us as MEP people simply because we don't render our models very often. In the case that you do, these tabs are going to be important to you if you want those things to render differently. But the biggest thing that we're going to be concerned about are the physical and the thermal settings. If I come over here to physical, you'll see that I have basic, additional information I can get as well, mechanical, and strength. Now here I can come in, and a lot of this is already set up over by Revit, but you can always come in and you can modify any of these settings. We can name it something different, we can give it different descriptions, but we can give it different tensile strengths as well, from behavior, being isotropic, orthotropic, or transverse isotropic, and set up some tensile strengths with Young's modulus, Poisson's ratio, and Shear's modulus, and our density. All this is going to play into factors for any stress tests or any analysis that you're going to use in Revit. And then we can move on to the thermal properties. Basically how this element is going to behave under certain thermal conditions. And you can set all that here. Like I said, the vast majority of this is going to be done out of the box. So you won't have to come in and necessarily mess with a lot of these options. But there are some options, material options that you're not going to find in here that you may be able to find on the internet. Those capabilities are built into Revit as well. So moving on out of this area, if I just go ahead and click OK here, we've selected that aluminum pipe, and we can go ahead and give this any schedule type or name that we want. So if we wanted to say Schedule 80, here we absolutely could. We can call this whatever we want, and again, this is completely up to you. You can use this to name it per your firm standards or whatever you would like. You'll get a preview of the segment name right here to show you what the end result will ultimately look like. And then you have a setting for duplicating size catalog. What this is going to do is it's going to look at all the existing size catalogs that you've already made and give you the ability to duplicate one. This works really well if all your size catalogs are equal. Anybody who's really dealt with pipe for any period of time understands that no pipe is really equal, and there's nothing 4-inch for about a 4-inch pipe, for example. And so most of the time you're going to pick one of these that's pretty close to what you're looking for. So I'll just start with this PVC rigid schedule 80, and I'll click OK. Now you can see that aluminum segment has been added here. Now we have some other properties that we can set. We can set a roughness value, and we can do a description of what this is. The roughness value, out of all the values I've tried to find with pipe, this seems to be the most challenging one to find per manufacturer. Usually I scour the internet for something like this. I've downloaded some great piping analysis programs that give me a lot of these values, as well as, say for example, like a Navco piping data log, which is going to house a lot of this roughness value information. So just for now, since I don't have that value, I'm going to go ahead and leave it just like it is. But then I'm going to add my segment description, and when I do my segment descriptions, I usually like to add my initials and the date of which it was done. So I can say this is the aluminum schedule 80, and then the catalog maybe I based it on. So if this was, like, say for example, Spears catalog, maybe the release date of the catalog, so I don't know that, so I'll just say 111 for example. The initials and the date that you actually accomplished this, or this was actually completed. Now I'll come down here to segments and sizes. I'm just going to do some, let's see here, just do some estimating here, really just kind of shooting from the hip to kind of show you how this all works. I'll go ahead and do a new size. When you do a new size, we're going to have to put in the actual size of the pipe that we're looking at. So I'm going to go with the 14-inch. The inside diameter of that, just for the sake of argument, is going to be 13.5, and the outside diameter is going to be 14. And we'll click OK. You can see how it adds this down to the list of pipes, or segments and sizes inside this different material type. And before I go on to making actual pipe types or making pipe systems, this is where I want to spend the vast majority of my time first. I want to create all my segments and sizes, because all my segments and sizes, and my fluids for that matter, are going to be tied to my pipe types, which are going to be tied to my pipe systems. So this would be the first step in a 3-step process, would be creating all my material types and schedule types. So here I can click OK. And I can OK out here as well, because we'll be coming back to routing preferences. Actually, you know what, let's stay in routing preferences right now. So here we go to routing preferences. If you lost me there for a second when I almost lost myself, we created a mechanical pipe type, an aluminum pipe type, aluminum schedule 80, just for the sake of argument here. So if I OK out of this, now we get back into our routing preferences. And again, I get here by right-clicking on my pipe types and then going to type properties and then routing preferences. As you can see here on the routing preferences, this is the standard routing preference that is open right now. And what you have here is the ability to restrict your routing purely driven by size. It's not driven by anything else. You can load as many fittings on here as you want, but Revit is always going to use whichever fitting is at the top. You could load a 90-degree elbow in here and a 45-degree elbow in here and use this pipe type to draw any sort of system, and it would always want to plug in the 90-degree elbow that you started here. What a lot of people do to combat this is you can do family content creation that does the 45 and the 90 in the same family, thus only having to have one elbow in here, or you create different routing, different pipe types per routing preference that you want. But again, the only way that you can limit this is by size. So right now I can see that this is completely wrong with what I'm doing. I want to grab the pipe segment here, So if I grab the pipe segment, there it is, aluminum schedule 80, and then I can take this carbon steel off of there. And rather than have a size limitation, I'm just going to have this set to all by taking and deleting this value. And so it looks like I've just set it up for my entire range. So 1/2 inch to 14 inch. Then I'm going to go ahead and look at my elbows as the next count here. I'm going to go ahead and eliminate this bottom one. It can be gone. And I can change this generic standard. Oh, let's go welded where we were before and take this to 14 inch as well. T, we can load in a different T type for a junction type. Notice that you have a tap junction type and a T junction type. You can pick whichever one you want. Just whichever one you want is going to drive your junction type right down here. So you're going to go ahead and want to pick whichever specific one you're after. Since I picked T, I'm going to pick this welded one here. Again, setting the size range to 14 and eliminating my second fitting type. Then crosses, again, same workflow. You can also, if you want, select whichever fitting you want that's already put in this list, bump it up to the top, and then you can erase the other one from the bottom. You still have to come in here and readjust the size range though. We're going to go ahead and again use the generic standard or the welded for our transitions. Again, we'll set them. Coupling we'll keep generic. We don't have a flange in this particular scenario, and we'll go with the welded cap as well. And we could say OK. Now that brings us back to the regular type properties of the actual pipe type. What you'll see here is that you have the ability, if you'd really like to, create all these different pipe types and give them all this different information. We can put an image in here simply by clicking here, going to add, and then going out to an image. So I'll just say pick this one for example. I can add this image, so click OK. Now that image will pop up over here whenever we draw our pipe. If you're using Revit keynotes, here you can come in and add a specific keynote to this pipe type that you want to be populated whenever this pipe type is used. This requires obviously editing the outside file for keynotes inside of Revit. You can then add a model number or a manufacturer, so say for example Spears. Any comments you might want to add here as well. Just again, comments are used mainly for picking up the ball and running with it after someone has either left the company or is no longer in the department, whatever. We want to be able to leave notes here so that anybody else who has to come in and modify any of this stuff kind of understands where you were when you stopped. Then our URL option. What we're able to do here is go ahead and type in a path or type in a website where we can find the cut sheet information for this specific pipe or fitting for that matter. The URL capabilities exist in just about every piece of Revit family content and pipe content, duct content, or you can add it there if it doesn't already exist. Then we can add a description as to what we did here. So we can say webinar pipe type. Add any assembly code, any type mark value. The type mark values are a big advantage in, say, in a starter project if you would like to tag by type mark value and harness some data there, and as well as cost. Cost can also be scheduled just like anything else in Revit, so we can get quantifications and costs of a project right away, or I shouldn't say right away, but as accurately as possible given the model's development level. Once I'm done with all that, I can click OK. And the first thing I see here is that I've misnamed my pipe type. So I can come to my pipe types, I can right click on that, I can rename it. I'm going to call this aluminum schedule 80. If you notice here too, I've got chilled water, PVC, domestic waste vent, and standard. These are the three that come out of the box. If I need to create additional pipe types, it's as simple as selecting one, right-clicking on it, and duplicating it. Then right-clicking on it again, renaming it. Then if you right-click on it again, you can go to Type Properties, edit your routing preferences, edit all your identity data information, and then again, when you go through routing preferences, now you can go to segments and sizes, and you can create anything additional that's there if you don't have it already, or just simply pick the ones that you've already created. If you adhere to the workflow I recommend, everything that you need is already going to be in here, so it's as simple as just selecting the ones that you do need and moving on. So I'll cancel out of here and cancel out of here. All right. Now if I want to draw this with this pipe type, I can draw with this pipe type by just simply going to my Systems tab, drawing a pipe, finding it in my drop down. Here it is. And I'm drawing pipe. If I change this to fine, see I got a nice double line pipe. Now I want to check my routing preferences, make sure they're all good, so I'll draw some pipe down here. I got a nice T, double check the functionality, or excuse me, I got a nice elbow, double check the functionality of the elbow, turn it into a T, that works great. So what I want to do here is just go ahead and double check my routing preferences, make sure all that is working. Let's do a create similar here. Draw from this pipe, make sure it plugs in the right T, and it does. I'll draw another one, make sure I get across. I do. All right, so it looks like my pipe type is doing pretty good here. I'm going to just go ahead and do a create similar again and check the reducer. And it plugged in the reducer well. Okay. It's always a good idea once your pipe type is finished and totally complete to come in here and test it really quick. Make sure your routing preferences are working well. Verify that these fittings that are getting installed are the fittings that you set up inside of your routing preferences. I can see that they're the welded generic. So everything looks to be working okay. That is in essence, in a nutshell, how we deal with creating different pipe types. A really easy way to think about this is that pipe types are material and pipe systems are pipe systems. Obviously that's not 100% true with pipe types, them being material, but it's a good generality to use when you're discussing it with people who don't necessarily understand what pipe types are. Obviously, like we discussed earlier and you saw with routing preferences, that if you say, for example, wanted to set up a cast iron pipe type family that had long sweep elbows, short sweep elbows, and regular 90-degree elbows, if you wanted to have those all set up predefined in routing preferences, you would have to create 3 different pipe types, one for each of those different elbow styles. Now that we've kind of looked a little bit at pipe types here, we're going to go ahead and move on to pipe systems. I'll go ahead and expand pipe systems here. Expand them again. And this is the out-of-box content. Really haven't done anything to this. So this is what you should be used to seeing out of the box with Revit. Again, to just create a new one, it's simply right-clicking on one that exists and duplicating it. Now you can duplicate systems that are more closely related to the one you're about to create to give yourself a little less work, but it's not a huge time saver to go ahead and do that. So the right-click commands are also used here in the pipe system. So if I right-click here, go to rename, and I can name this system. I'm just going to name it webinar. So you guys can see it there, and it's very clear. Here it is at the bottom. Now if I right-click this on this again, I'm going to go back to type properties. Now here are the type property values for that particular system. You'll see here there's a couple different pieces of data that we can go ahead and fill out, but we'll start here under mechanical and we'll work our way down, and then we'll come back up to graphics. Your material that you want to use is typically by category because the material is already set inside your pipe types. So you use your pipe types, the right pipe types with this family, and the material category is already going to be plugged in. Calculations, we can limit what calculations we want to be able to be performed inside of this system, be it flow only, none, or performance, or all of the above. Typically, people are going to have this set to all if you're going to be doing any sort of calculations inside of Revit. Then here we have a system classification. Note it's grayed out. Again, we cannot create system classifications. We can only create additional systems. The classification is something that's completely independent in Revit. That is really the only thing that drives selecting which pipe system to duplicate. That's why so many people use the other pipe system because of its system classification settings. Then we pick which fluid type we want running through this pipe system. Is it going to be water? Is it going to be any of these polypropylene or ethylene glycol mixtures that we have already preloaded? Again, you find that underneath your mechanical settings, and that's why it's a good idea to accomplish all your mechanical settings before you start setting up any types or any systems, because you're going to use that information here. Same thing with the temperature degree. That gets pulled from that water table. So again, it's important to have that stuff set up and ready to go. Then which flow convention method are we going to use? Be it flush valves or tanks. The vast majority of buildings nowadays being built that are new are valves. The vast majority of you are going to have that set to flush valves. Then we get into identity data. Again, imaging, abbreviation, URL type comments, and descriptions. The abbreviation is very important with pipe systems simply because the vast majority of pipe filters that you're going to set up are going to have a filter in them that looks at the abbreviation of the pipe system. That's usually the easiest way to set up any filters. Again, you can set up filters however you would possibly like. But the vast majority of the time and the easiest way to do it is going to be by the abbreviation. So since this is named webinar as a pipe system, I'm just going to type in WEB as my system abbreviations. Then again, I can attach a URL, finding any additional information outside of Revit for this particular system, any type comments or any description information as well. Now we move into the rise drop symbols. This is where we can go ahead and change what symbols we want to use for that particular pipe system. If I hit my search button over there, you can see that I have all these different types already preloaded into Revit that I can choose to use. I can also choose a two-line symbols and single-line symbols independently, and then how those are going to appear. You can go ahead and set all this. A lot of times, clients of ours like to keep the same rise and drop symbols for every system simply because it's just showing pipe up and down. But again, you can set this to whatever values you want. Then when we get all done looking at all this additional information down here, we can come back up to graphic overrides and hit edit. And this is where we're going to control the weight of the line, the color of the lines inside of Revit, okay, and the pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a pattern here. Let's go center, okay. We'll make it red and thick lines and click OK. And then I can click OK here. And then when I take any one of these pipes and I scroll down and change it from the hydronic supply system to the webinar system, we obviously have a pipe issue because of the system class, so I will go up here to my views. Let's go into plumbing 1, and there it is. So, time's about up here, guys. It looks like this is all I was able to get through today. I'm definitely going to set up another webinar to go over this again, probably called Piping Soup to Nuts El Dos, just so that we can touch on a lot of other topics here, because there's more topics I wanted to be able to touch on for this piping webinar. I would like to get into modeling practices, different workflows that work really well, but also get into families and lookup tables and how those affect pipe fittings. So just If you guys have to get off the webinar right now because you've got work to do, I completely understand. If you'd like to hang out, I'm looking at a couple questions that are up on the board here, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. Let's see here. We got a question about calculation and how many firms are using calculations inside of Revit. We have a lot of firms that we do business with that are calculating head pressure, they're calculating flow, but a lot of that is predicated on having all your pipes, types and systems all set up and ready to go. It's really hard. The analytics in Revit work really well, but they require you to have your setup done. If you don't set up your pipes and your pipe types or your ducts and duct types and duct systems for that matter, the analytics aren't going to work very well. You can go in and set, you can get down as far as coefficients for head pressure on fittings. We, as a percentage of the amount of clients we work with, I'd say that it's a relatively small percentage because very few clients actually take it this far and get this all set up. Another question about pipe types not creating the correct fittings. That happens all the time. Pipe types are independent from fittings. Fittings are RFA files or family files, and a lot of that requires you to either recreate the family file or to go ahead and download those family file content from a specific manufacturer. Whenever you download content off the internet, there's a lot of hit and miss types of scenarios. Some content can be really good, some content can be really bad. So it's really a case-by-case basis and what exactly you're trying to accomplish for maybe a starter project versus just trying to get a project out the door because it's due. So that's a case-by-case basis. Proceed with caution if you're going to download anything from the internet. Oftentimes it needs to be downloaded and fixed. So it's just not an end-all be-all solution downloading it from the internet. Another question about being able to connect to plumbing fixtures and have it not change color. You can do that if you make all your systems the same color as the fixture. The reason that fixture changes color is because it's driven by the connector in the fixture and the system assigned to that connector. So as soon as something is connected to it, whatever's first connected to it, that's going to be the system classification, if you will, for that particular pipe fixture. And that's just kind of baked into Revit. Oh yeah, comment on conduit. Yes, something like this would be awesome for conduit. That is something that we are currently talking to Autodesk about, creating additional functionality in that. AU is coming up here real soon, and I plan on having some conversations with the Revit MEP team when I'm there. We have a question here regarding PEX pipe types, doing flex types. You can draw flexible pipe in Revit, and that command is under the Systems tab, and it's right here. As far as creating additional flex pipe types, that is something I have never really dove into, excuse me. You can see that they're right here. We can just check it out really quick if I right-click. Right-click here, duplicate, right-click, type properties, and here we can create different flexible pipe types. Obviously we have preferred junction types, looks like here, so T's and taps, okay. So we got a little bit of a routing preference set up here. We have a roughness value here, and then we have the standard identity data that goes along with that tubing. You can see we have no material types, nothing that sets any values really for calculations. The only thing we have for that is the roughness value. So the system calc capabilities in Revit, I would be kind of skeptical of when it comes to flex pipe right now. When I start seeing more additional functionality here as far as adding material types and adding OD, ID information, those calculations will probably get more accurate. Have questions moving forward with doing additional webinars kind of along these lines for electrical? Absolutely. We will be posting those webinars as they become available or as we'll be creating them. Ooh, an easy way to have double line and single line pipe in the same view is the final question. That is a really good question. It's a really tough thing to do in the same view because the pipe visibility is driven by our detail level here. So if I'm on fine like I am now, I have double line. If I'm on medium, I have single. And if I'm on coarse, I have single as well. Pipe is the only thing in Revit that you have to be on fine on to get a double level or double line detail. This has been another commonly requested feature for Revit to have. A lot of companies and our clients of ours out there, they want to be able to show, say for example, 4-inch and bigger as a double line and 4 inches smaller as a single line. I have not been able to come up with a creative way that works really well and consistently to be able to do that. But that is, again, another thing that I plan on taking to Autodesk University with me and having a conversation with the MEP team there for Revit and seeing what we can't do about that. If no one's going to AU, it's next week. Yeah, next week already. Holy cow. If you're going there, I hope to see you there. If not, I'll be there talking to the Revit MEP team for you on your behalf to, again, try to convince them to put additional functionality into Revit MEP that we all could use and benefit from. So that wraps up the webinar for today, guys. Once again, thanks for coming. Appreciate your time and effort here. And if you have any additional questions or want to contact us here at CTC, the website is cadtechnologycenter.com, and you can always email us at support@cadtechnologycenter.com. So once again, thanks for joining everybody, and have yourselves a wonderful day.